can see how we're. Well, at the same time.
Like you're doing now.
Concepts. Which is a lot of them.
Should I announce again? No.
Hello. I think most of you know me as Nicole Johnson. My friend M. Coran is out there and he'll be coming in soon. He and I are the co-chairs of P.h.D. Marshfield. And Mike was, our own Dr. Mike Schulein was willing to work with us, has done talks before, and decided to help us take this talk on the road. So FPC was a good place to start. And I hope that you guys enjoy what he has to say.
Thanks, Nicole. Welcome. Sitting in the service today, I was struck by the flow of the service. Some days it just hits me more than others, and this was one of those, where the scripture was then taken and embodied in the sermon. It was reflected in the song, and it was demonstrated in the announcements for what we as a community, as a congregation, are doing. The flow of all of that is such a gift, and to be able to be part of that. And my hope is that our talk today continues that flow from this morning. The topic is creating a safe place for our children. And Nicole and the group that was forming the P.h.D. a few years ago had asked me to do a talk. And I was humbled by that and didn't think I had much to say. And I'm going to have emotion as I do this talk, okay? And I'm going to respect my emotion when I need to by pausing and breathing, and then I'll continue. It took my kids telling me, hello, what have you lived your life doing? The kids you work with, the stories you've told. And then my oldest kid saying, hello, look at me, you know, I'm queer, non-binary, trans, hello, you're my parent. I've taught you a lot about how to have a kid who's coming out and how you learn to do this. And then I felt stupid, like, well, duh.
You didn't feel safe.
Yeah, suddenly it's like, okay, I guess I've got some perspective on this. And so you'll be hearing that today. The other perspective I have is that when Nicole asked me this past summer if I'd be willing to do this again, I said, well, how should I change it and update it? And she just said, Mike, it doesn't need updating. It's needed more now than it was 2 years ago. And I have to say that was a very saddening reality. And I want to speak to that reality before we get into the topic on why this is even more relevant now than it was even 2 years ago. This was from a P.h.D. Marshfield newsletter in just this past September. Only 38% of young people report their home is affirming, and just over half say their school is affirming. Think about that. The majority of the kids say they're growing up in homes that are not affirming. The Trevor Project's research consistently finds that LGBTQ plus young people report lower rates of attempting suicide when they have access to affirming space. Second point of relevance for why, sadly, this is more important now than even perhaps a few years ago, comes from the Southern Poverty Law Center, also in their newsletter this past fall. In 2023, the number of anti-LGBTQ hate groups listed by SPLC increased by about 1/3 to 86. This is the highest number of anti-LGBTQ plus groups SPLC has ever listed.
Actual groups that are.
Yes. Yeah, actual groups. So it's with that kind of sadness that offer to repeat this presentation. I think of the flow, and in some ways, preaching to the choir with this talk. I mean, when you look, first page, our mission statement, we want to be a safe place, a sanctuary where people are accepted, included, and cared for as they are. Or even in the communion today, the phrase that some 30 years ago, when I was attending church at FPC for the first time, and it was a communion Sunday, and I heard that phrase, all are welcome at this table. And I realized, here I was in my 40s at the time, and a churchgoer, I had never once before heard that phrase. All are welcome at this table. And it left a dent. And 30 years later, here I am. So some relevance to creating a safe place. And let's start with making this a safe place right here, right now. Think about what helps you feel safe. Safe on the outside, your surrounding, the people you're surrounded by. What helps you feel safe? How about on the inside? What helps you feel safe in here? What helps you feel safe with your own thoughts and what your own interior inside voice tells you about you and about others? What's it like when you feel safe? Think about that. What's it like when you really feel safe in a space? Whether that space is with another person, it's a physical space. Yeah. Breathing's a little different, shoulders drop. The photo of a feeling of safe space occurred with my 2-year-old grandchild about a week ago. Okay? And we've been in a circumstance recently where we've had our granddaughter a lot in the last 2 months, a lot. And we've moved from the grandparents you visit to sort of being a second home. And we're sitting there with my grandchild, and we're just having breakfast and just kind of chatting. And suddenly I feel this thing, this little foot comes over and plops against my leg. And that wasn't a natural position for her to put that leg, right? Cozy. Safe can feel cozy. On the flip, what's it feel like when you don't feel safe? What's your experience of not feeling? Think to a space in your life where that may have happened to you. Then imagine that space occurring every day in your life as you're growing up, and increasingly being aware of those concerns for safety as you become more aware of who you are and how you are compared to a host culture or host society. Let's start by talking about ways to make this place a safe place right now. And that's we practice respect in this moment, holding as much as we can that concept from Dan this morning in the sermon of unconditional hospitality, that we're all welcome here. And we don't all have to be the same to be welcome and valued. Part of the safety on the outside is having a sense for the who, what, when, where. When we have a sense of who are we around, how are they going to be with us? We have a sense for what's going to be occurring in that space. A sense of when, meaning I get to own my presence, physical presence. So for owning that is, you can decide, oh, that's enough of Mike. And if you're done, leave when you're done. Okay? I'm not going to be offended if you get up and leave before I'm done chatting with you. Okay? Take your time. Make that your win for however long that is for you. And the wearer of this space. All of those contribute on the outside. On the inside, for our safety, particularly is our self-talk, connected to our sense of self. And my phrase with this is, there's no guilt with learning. There's celebration. If I realize I've screwed up, I celebrate that. It's like, Mike, you're learning, okay? Oh yeah, I did it that way, and now I'm more aware of how to do it this way. Okay? That certainly was my experience when my adult child came out to me and introduced me to their chosen name, and how I had to learn not to use their dead name, and would mess that up repeatedly until I started practicing in the mirror. And I could have looked at myself and gone, how stupid. Come on, you're having to practice what to call your kid a love of your life? And then I go, yeah, I am, because my kid is worth it. And my learning how to respect this part of who they are and how they are is worth it. And then I continued in the mirror. I'm at about 80% on it. And it tends to be when I'm going talking fast and I'm excited with them, whoop, I switch back into the old pronoun. And then I now almost 100% of the time catch myself and apologize and then quickly move on. Okay? So no guilt with learning, celebration. I'm going to ask you to do a breathing with me that was referenced also during the service, and it's on the Outreach Committee bulletin board on help we're in a political conversation. And it's a distilling down the 2 commandments from Christ, okay, which you heard and were the charge going out today. I'm going to ask you with me to take in a deep breath, and as you take it in, think, love God. Then hold that breath for a moment. And then as you exhale slowly, think, love others. Everybody got it? Here we go. Breathe in. And out. Thank you for helping to create this safe place for a discussion. Love God, love others. What do your kids do when they don't feel safe? Thinking back with your own kids or kids that you got to know and love, what do they do? What have you seen with kids? When they don't feel safe, what happens?
Run away, leave the room.
Flee, run away. Yes.
Clam up.
Clam up. Yep.
Cry, get loud.
Cry. Ooh, the flip, get loud.
Mhm.
Flip to the aggressive
Mhm.
to protect themselves. Any other things you've seen?
I mean, oftentimes they'll cling to the person they do feel safe with.
Yes. Find that safe place, that safe person. Yeah, thanks. So here's, they hide, they get quiet, they cling, they flip into more aggressive, which can then fool us into thinking that what we see is what we get. We don't stop to think, wait, what's underneath that? Right? Typically, particularly in my career, helping parents look at what's underneath the anger in their kid. And not always. Sometimes anger was just anger, but often there was something underneath. And they get narrowed focus. When our kids don't feel safe, their focus narrows and they become hypervigilant on what the threat may be. So their bandwidth narrows. So think of that. What happens when a kid doesn't feel safe and their bandwidth and what they pay attention to narrows? And that's not just in the moment, but it recurs and it occurs repeatedly, and they're exposed to it from multiple environments.
I'll answer that. They don't even feel the warmth and acceptance and welcome from others. They're just got walls.
Yes,
They've just got walls.
yes, did everybody hear that? They have built walls to protect themselves. I thought this next slide really captured the experience of somebody not feeling safe, not just on the outside, but then trapped themselves in their walls and walled off part of themselves. I waited until I was 26 to admit to myself I might be gay. I was so ashamed of it. And shame is that thing about self. Guilt is about behavior and action. Shame is about identity. Okay? To be ashamed of part of yourself that you wall it off. That's where particularly we'll see something sometimes called internalized homophobia. They're afraid of a part of themselves. And then they may get loud, as you were describing. They may get loud in how they advocate in a homophobic manner because it's walled off from themselves. What contributes to our kids, our LGBT plus kids hiding? And I call this the 4 Ds. And with much in my life and career, my knowledge is based on what I've learned from others and their life experience. I can't tell you where I got some of these from, and then I just kind of add my part to it. All right. So these are the 4 Ds that contribute: disregard, dismiss, disrespect, discriminate. Disregard means just not acknowledging. Okay? Some years ago, some people were talking about how they don't see color. Was their response to issues about racism? And how do we manage that? Well, I just don't see color. That was a highly disregarding, if not dismissing statement. That was a saying, your experience of your color is irrelevant. It didn't really matter. It's all the same. That's a statement from privilege. The second is dismiss. It's not a big deal. Okay. Why are you bringing this up? Okay. Come on, you'll grow out of it. Okay. And then disrespect is becoming more active. Name calling. Particularly thinking with kids, name calling. And the fourth is the discrimination. We're going to make your experience, we're going to intentionally make your life experience less than because of something about you that I don't like. With this, then we go back to affirming spaces. Affirming spaces are spaces that regard, value, respect, include, and support. Unsafe spaces practice the 4 Ds. So when you look at the data, the self-reporting, that only 38% of young people report their home is affirming. That's a significant majority of kids saying they are in homes where some aspects of the 4 Ds are very alive. And when you have to build a wall up, when you don't get to go home and feel home as your safe space, you got a problem. For adults, it's you have a stressful job and you get to go home at night and home is a space. And we knew, and I certainly saw this in my career, when the adult didn't have the home as a safe space and they had a job space that was stressful, that intensified the behavioral health issues they were facing. So imagine that as a kid. If your school's not particularly affirming for you and your home isn't affirming, think of the walls you build to try to survive that. Here are some impacts. When you think of it, what's the most common thing parents wish for their kids as adults? What do you want your kids to be? Happy. Not rich, happy. And that's why this slide is the top up for what do we look at for the impacts of non-affirming spaces. Youth believe they can be a happy LGBTQ adult. Look at the impact of an affirming family environment and family acceptance towards thinking you can be happy as an adult. When we're not affirmed growing up, it's hard to picture being affirmed, loved, happy, safe as an adult. Powerful thought when we want our kids to be happy. Kids will turn to all sorts of stressful ways of trying to manage not feeling safe or accepted. So we're looking at substance use to try to numb the experience as they hide behind the walls. Again, the relationship between affirming and substance use is very striking. Suicide attempts. Strongly related to sense of that having that safe home, that affirming home. And school. So large study, 800,000 students. LGBTQ plus students were at high risk for being bullied, chronic sadness, thoughts of suicide, and poor learning engagement and academic performance. Because your bandwidth is narrowed when you don't feel safe. Harder to pay attention to learning and thinking when you're watching carefully for the kid next to you and whether they're going to smack you or you're going to hear stuff, hurtful words. Okay. Now some tools. I'm a very pragmatic kind of person, and just am that way across all the spheres of my life, and that was also true in my career. It was first get a sense for how serious the problems are, their underpinnings, and now what are some practical tools to use them with. Nicest compliment I got in my career was sitting on a plane next to someone I didn't know, coming back from a conference, and I was chatting with this person, and inevitably it gets to the question, oh, what do you do? Oh, here, let's see what happens. And I told the person, oh, I'm a psychologist, and they paused, and they looked at me and went, huh, I would have never thought that. And I went, yes. So that's what you're going to get right now. It's these practical things from me. And you can go, well, that was nice, Mike, but really, you were a psychologist? Yes, I'm fine with that. Okay. So let's talk about 7 tools to foster safety for our LGBTQ plus kids. And these are both professionally tested and informed and personally lived and informed. And it starts with the phrase, I love you. That's where we start as a tool to foster safety. And subtly, it's not, I love you no matter what, or I love you no matter who you are. Because that's a subtle difference. I love you no matter what means there's something about you that's a problem, and I still love you. That's not really the message we want to give our kids. It's just, I love you. That's the unconditional message. I love you no matter what or who you are. That's a conditional message. Okay? So that first tool is keep it short. I love you. Okay? Notice how we shortened up even for the breathing. Love God, love others. So it starts with I love you. Next, recognize your position. All of you in here are in positions of privilege. Recognize those. Okay? Many of them, you didn't have much to say over whether you were going to get them or not. So talk about privilege. You have a white male standing in front of you who's college educated, financially fairly secure, and a boomer, and straight, and married. That ticks off so many privilege categories. It's unbelievable. Oh, and this vehicle, he's not as much lately, but this vehicle is in generally good shape. That's such a high position of privilege. Knowing your position is important as you engage with your kids and others who aren't in the same privileged positions you are. Because the risk is we will project from our life space with our privilege onto those others. Okay? My adult kid who's trans, non-binary, queer, is not in the same space I'm in. And that invites me to learn from them and not just assume that I get it or I understand. What a disrespectful message. So recognize your position. Second, be very deliberate on removing the 4D in how you talk, how you represent your space. And that's more work than you might think. How do you remove the 4Ds from your life space?
This to me is a very, because of my English background, this to me is a very English focused or language focused tool. Because I find personally, in the beginning when you listed what is it to disregard, what is it to dismiss, what is it to disrespect, I find, a couple of the comments that you made, I was like, how is that disregarding? And I find myself, I'm very keyed into language, asking for the definition, a better definition of disregard, because I probably have said some of those things, and I think I didn't mean, that's not what my intent was. So what language for me feels affirming and providing safety for a person of the LGBTQ plus community is disregarding. And so to me, I don't know if it's a generational thing or just a linguistic developmental change that's happening, because that's the thing you hear all the time, like, I'm not going to use those pronouns. They can use my pronoun, all of that kind of bristly behavior. And to me, it's really the language growing. It's not necessarily that those things are in the space, but it's the way that it's communicated. And that's very frustrating for a person like myself, I'm very into, I feel like I want to provide that space. I feel that I do for people who speak the same language I speak, but I think there's, my husband and I have had this conversation about Oriental food.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he said one day, we're going to get China chef. I really love Oriental food, whatever. And everyone at the table, except for me, just like exploded on him because of that term. Yeah. And he's like, wait a minute, isn't that, we talk about the Occident and the Orient. It's a global term. It's he's 73. And I think that linguistic conundrum is what is very difficult to navigate for people who want to provide these safe spaces. Because my husband, those you know him, he is so laid back, and he is not, I don't think he's any of those, or, the negative terms, but boy, they just blasted him. And I probably have used the expression, I don't see color, you're all my friends, I don't see that as a, but then now I'm hearing that that's really a disregard, and maybe for Bill, that was a disregarding linguistic term. Mm-hmm. So how do we linguistically navigate this? This is, that's a nice rule to say to remove that, but it's very difficult to do. Or do you have some?
I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
We hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
with humility, with recognizing that language changes. Okay? That language is an art, and art changes. It doesn't stay the same. And I don't want to go too far, but even in church services, okay, and how we call God, God. And you'll notice some little bit of degendering of God in our vocabulary. Okay, and that's how we grow. But it assumes humility. That whether I intended disrespect or disregard doesn't matter if the people who are connected to that are saying, could we not use that language? Out of respect, I'm going to say, this is a language that affects you. Yes, I will do that. Okay. My privilege is saying that language doesn't bother me, so it shouldn't bother you. What's your problem with my language? Okay. And so,
I think it's the unknowing though. It's like,
and
I
then,
wasn't attacking you, but I feel like you're now attacking me.
right. Okay.
Because I don't
And
know.
so there's that growing together,
Yeah.
knowing that people can be learning without intending harm.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a collaboration. P.Flag and the P.Flag website is among others, is a great resource for looking at vocabulary, for looking at how to learn with that vocabulary. I particularly liked the one for grandparents, okay, for the information for grandparents on that, because we talk about how do you extend support. That includes how do you engage your family around your child who has come out. Okay? So removing those from your environment, the challenge of that is also going to be, as you remove that, who do you support? Who do you have friendships with? What communities do you live in? And if you have friends who are actively engaged in those 4 Ds, and you're a good friend of theirs, and they're in your home, your kids will notice that. That says something to them. Okay, they're looking at actions, not just words. If your words say "I love you," your actions say, "And I'm not setting boundaries with people who disregard, dismiss, disrespect, or discriminate against you and a really important part of yourself." That's an inconsistency. And when you don't feel safe, you're hyper vigilant to the inconsistency. There's no neutral on that. Okay. If you don't feel safe and you see somebody you think is your friend, but then they're also hanging and doing stuff with these people over here that are active discriminators or disregarders, that's a problem. Okay. And you really have to, the challenge is to have that that moment of looking at how do you work with that? And that's a discomfort as the parent or the friend. Yeah, Sue.
Could it be used as an opportunity if you were to have a conversation with your child and just say, this person's going to be here, I disagree with that, but sometimes you want to maintain communication with people so that maybe you can help move them in another direction, but you want to make sure that your child or whoever, it's a friend or whatever, understands that they're still a human being, I'm still, and I'm hoping that maybe I can help move them. But at least you communicate that.
Yeah, and so I think that's a key in this because it's a process that's never done. I'm not done with this process with my child. And the key to that is that open communication done out of love. And looking at how do we work with this. I'm going to get to that in a second as an example of how I then worked with my adult child regarding my mother when it came to how do we deal with that. Okay. And third, be willing to learn from others, especially your kid. Ask, listen, communicate. Be a teachable parent. Oh, you ever have a time when your kid taught you something and you saw the look on their faces, they realized they were teaching you something and you were allowing that to be? You didn't have to be the sage on the stage. Right? In healthcare, it's, it's called Dr. Google now, okay? But early on with that transition, we had to teach this, because I was involved with a physician training at the clinic was one of my roles. And we had to teach physicians to learn how to move from the concept of being the sage on the stage to the guide on the side. Okay? Okay? And the guide on the side meant collaboration. You're working with, not talking at. Right? So being that kind of parent. And then the example of mirror practice, be willing to do something that at first you think is foolish. Looking at myself in the mirror and seeing myself using the right pronoun. Okay, it helped. All right, so here's an example of, and I'll give you the story behind this. So my adult child asked me to talk with my 90-year-old mother about names and pronouns. And behind that, then the fact that my child had come out and what that meant for their dear grandchild. And they were very scared. And I talked with them and they just said, please, would you do this? Okay. Okay. So I did. And my 90-year-old mother, talk about when you underestimate people, listened and listened and asked a couple questions. And said they were a little confused, but this is their grandchild. And they love them. And then my 90-year-old grandmother said these words, and they're boom. I may be 90, but I can still open the window and let in fresh air.
Oh, wow.
I may be 90, but I can still open the window and let in fresh air. That's love. And then there's hope. Okay, that's what I'm hoping you'll encounter if you're in those spaces as well. More tools, feeling rules. These are the fundamentals which we often forget and violate. First, you have a right to all your feelings. I felt guilty about having some negative feelings when my kid came out. Because I wanted them to be in this category, and I decided in that category, that's how they'll be happy. Because remember, we want our kids to be happy as adults. Well, that meant they needed to be in this category over here, but I knew this category over here they're now saying they're in might be a threat to their being happy. It may take more work, and it'll take more work on my part. And so then I felt guilty about that. And then I had to go back, wait a minute, that's how you feel. And now what do you want to do with that feeling? Right? I want to work with that feeling. Second, you have a right to say all your feelings. That's not an excuse to justify disrespect or attacking others. So it's with civility, with caring. And you have a right to say how you feel. Right? So for me, it was worried. Scared that my adult kid was going to be encountering really harsh stuff in their life. And third, no one has a right to tell me or you what to feel. If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. If they say, oh, don't feel that way. Boo! Yuck. Okay, you'll get over it. Or the big one for parents when their kid has a romantic breakup. Oh, you'll get over it, honey. There are more fish in the sea. Yeah. Okay. No, it sucks. I'm sorry, and I'm here for you as you do that. No one has a right to tell you what to feel. So it's very critical, basic rule. Follow the feeling rules with your kid as they go through life, and as they bring things to you. Next one, and I love this because I had to practice this. And I had to help parents, in my career profession, I had to help parents learn to do this with their kids who were coming out a lot. And consistently, kids welcome our repairs. They welcome them. Okay, apologize, make repairs, or what I call the 3 A's. First, admit the mistake. Wrong pronouns, I'm sorry. Okay. First, you admit it. Then you apologize for it. I'm sorry. And then third, make amends. I'd like to do something to fix this. I'd like to do something to show you that I care. And you'll notice in making a repair for the phrases, the examples, each one starts with the word I. Because the moment you use any other word, it's not a repair, it's a blame. Because you know what that word will be if it's not I? You. Okay? You own a repair. You don't say you did this, or if you hadn't done that, I would. That's not a repair. Right? That's more like how a politician says, well, I'm sorry if you misunderstood what I was saying. What kind of repair is that? Right? So you own it. That tool by itself brings people together. It brings a parent and child together as they work together to learn and incorporate something new in the identity of their child. Very simple, very powerful.
Can I add also not to center yourself in that, like that it's if you misgender someone or if you say something rude, that it's not their job to then make you feel better about doing the wrong thing, saying the wrong thing. So just the quick turnaround of like, oh, sorry, her, continue on. Or the times that it's hard, like you were saying, Darlene, to remember all that when you're talking sometimes. But I've heard from other people that they really appreciate it if I notice somebody else using the wrong things and I correct them, or even if I don't correct, if I just hear someone saying she, and I'm like, oh yeah, they did whatever. And then sometimes you see that other person's head, your wheels turn to just notice that instead of making a big deal about it, just a way to shift it, I guess.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm smiling because we had this wonderful experience of having all of our kids in our home for 10 days, massive family slumber party. And some of them hadn't ever been in our home because they live out on the West Coast. And one of them was our 10-year-old granddaughter, okay, child of my adult child. And she catches me. And at first did it kind of, a little with irritation. And then just does it, just flows. To which I go, thanks, and then make the switch on those 10, 20% of the time when I'm animated and I forget. And then I've got my 10-year-old going and I'm Baba, they. Oh yeah, right. And then move on. And learning how to, no, that's not a criticism. Yeah, thanks. Next one is protect, advocate. Live like we all belong. Be an ally. One of the challenges that I've really seen parents face is with their religion when their kids come out. If they are members, participate in a religion or a church that does not practice the second of Christ's two commandments very well, where the word all is not used. And as they become increasingly aware of the needs for their child, and they look around at the communities in their life and find things aren't a good fit, a consistent fit, how do they work with that? That's been a tough one for a lot of families I've worked with. And being very respectful to that work while supporting the fact that that is part of their work to do. So it's not just about advocating for your child or other loved family member, it's about who and what am I connected to? And how will that be for my child or loved one? And final is use resources. You've got lots of company on how to practice with your tools, learn, grow, and truly welcome your kids and other loved ones. Nicole, you can speak to PFLAG, but PFLAG became an important part of my career right from very early on, because I had a therapy creates a safe place, and a career with kids teach you how to make your space safe, and if you're paying attention, you get better at it. And it wasn't by accident then, as I look back on how so many times I was the first adult a kid was testing out, sharing something super vulnerable about them. Talk about the prayer of St. Francis, make me an instrument of your peace, and testing that out, and then looking safely at knowing I wasn't going to do anything with that separate from them. This had to be them, not me doing anything with it.
Like in the clinical setting, are you seeing, I don't know how to put this exactly correctly, but anyway, like an age that you can say, yes, this is really where that child is, or you have your doubts as to whether the child has really thought things through? You know what I'm saying? And it seems strange when I hear on the news and whatever, they have this thing about they're trying to change sex on grade school kids. And it's like, that's way too young, in my opinion, for them to really know. Like, do you see it in the clinical setting where there's kind of an age range where you feel comfortable that, yes, this is really an issue for this child, and yes, this is something we need to deal with and work with?
That's a really, really good question. And it's and part of what makes it a good question, it's a very complicated answer. Because we humans are amazingly diverse. Okay, there's an old Star Trek phrase from the original series, infinite diversity, infinite combination. Okay, and I sure would see that with the kids I would work with, where we'd get past a depression or an anxiety, and I'd be listening for what's the underpinning to it. And that would be my entryway to kids starting to look at their uncertainties about their identities, including gender and sexuality, and how that they would start to become aware of maybe a little difference from their friends, and how they would start to talk about that and move from that to, at their speed, a sense of ability and safety to explore it further, because it had to be at their pace, because that was informed by their sense of safety around them. And I've seen therapists in my 20 years at Norwood. Sadly, it wasn't unusual that we had to undo some damage that were done by well-intending but not helpful therapy, where the therapist had a speed for which their client was supposed to go through that. That wasn't the client's speed. Okay, or the parents had a speed that wasn't the child's speed. So, to answer your question, yes, I see that. Okay, and often I'd have to wait, because I could, as I got to know the child, went, okay, I think there's going to be some of those core identity explorations and things for them to be dealing with, and they weren't there yet. And it was maybe 6 months later that they were able to bring it to words and bring it in the session. I couldn't make it my speed. By saying something, hey, bluntly, have you ever thought you might be gay?
No.
But you often hear like a mother will say when the child comes to them and says, takes all this time to say, I'm gay, and the mom goes, I've known that since you were
That's
6.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I've heard
Yeah.
parents say that, they've always known.
Does the interaction both professionally and within the family get further complicated by just the way adolescents normally are? They're in a
Yes.
turbulent and exploratory time. Their body's changing, their growth's changing, their hormones, all sorts of things are changing. Does that make it more complicated? And do you have some advice then for how you say, yeah, you're don't go out and drink again like that, but I can't condone your drinking, or driving crazy. How do you deal with some of that?
Well, that you're incorporating adolescent development and exploring, experimenting. My experience, and again, I want to be careful. I'm not standing here saying I'm an expert on LGBTQ+. I have experience working with kids. That wasn't my shingle, so to speak. It's just that I had a safe space, and suddenly I'm doing this over and over, and then studying up, and then living up in my own life. My experience is that the turbulence of adolescence didn't seem to be connected to the emerging identity. The turbulence was more about recognizing what was emerging, not whether it was emerging.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Nicole.
I think a good analogy that I try to tell parents when they're like, well, first my kids said they're gay and now they're some other gender, but just imagine that if you are creating this kind of safe space for people in your life, imagine that they have a closet and they know whatever they're wearing, whoever they are, something that they've been told doesn't fit right. And so they might go through trying on different clothing. Am I this? Am I goth? That was the thing back when I was like, people were really into being goth and they wear all this black stuff, but whatever, but that they're just trying on. So don't well, I just got used to calling you whatever and now you're changing your name again. They're trying to figure out who they are. The safer the space, the more likely that they can flow through that easily than the number of people who are like, my kid goes away to college and they come back as something different. There are enough of us parents that have experienced that in our own friend group that now we're trying to do something different for our own kids. So for instance, I was enjoying yesterday, a friend of mine has, I think he's a 6th grader and 2 4-year-olds. 4-year-old twins, a boy and a girl. The boy loves sparkly clothes, loves skirts, and the parents support it. You do you. And what that gives that child is the support of the parents for that child feels so secure that they know that they have their parents' love no matter what. And so who knows who that child will end up being, but he has the opportunity to experience that as he goes through life instead of, and I know my own kids, they get annoyed with me because I'm all P.h.D and advocate, and they're like, would you just shut up once in a while? So I just joked with Oliver, I'm like, you should come here and figure out how to be more supportive of the gay people in your life. He's like, get out of my way. But they have that internalized, and I haven't had as much of, I don't feel a lot of rebellion from them. Who knows what they're going through, but because they always know that I'm safe and they bring their friends to me. I don't know if that, different ages, it just depends on the person and the sort of family is what I've seen.
And Nicole, that example with the acceptance of the boy with his play and his dress, okay? Think back to the slide where it was the 26-year-old talking about feeling ashamed of something about himself. That little boy is less likely to feel ashamed because he was affirmed in his interests and his clothing, okay? And that's affirming. I'm reminded in college, I had a roommate for 2 years, and after the first year, he told me he was gay. Okay, sort of like the parent. I kind of had a clue, about my roommate. We were roommates, okay? And he said, well, does that change anything? Can we still be roommates? I said, well, yeah, why can't we still be roommates? And then I started to learn, okay, this is, back in the 70s. He had clothes in his closet in our, the house we rented with 3 or 4 other college students. He had clothes in his closet he couldn't take home with him at summer. Okay, because his parents would figure something out and he didn't feel safe with them because of their group and how they talked. So he literally had clothes he had to keep in the closet. So I'm thinking of that little boy who can have clothes that he doesn't have to keep in the closet.
There's a good Netflix special with Will Ferrell and his friend.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh,
There's an older one called Normal. That's a really good one too, if anybody wants to just watch some experiences.
nice.
It was very well done.
As we're looking to close, again, when we're looking at tools, pretty down to earth, recognize your position. Because it will be different from the position of the kid or others who you love. Look for the 4 Ds, because they can be subtle. The disrespect, discriminate, those may glow in the dark a bit. But the disregard and dismissing can be subtle. Be willing to learn. Allow yourself your feelings of guilt, embarrassment, whatever, as you realize, oh man, didn't know that, and then celebrate that you're learning. Open that window, get some fresh air. Those feeling rules, making repairs, advocate, use resources. And these tools aren't unique to parenting or supporting LGBTQ plus kids. It's just that when you're not in the majority culture, the host culture, there's more opportunity to not be affirmed, to be hurt, and more need for deliberate use of these tools. And thank you guys for being you and for being in this space today where we could talk about this. And Nicole, for bringing this from P.Flag for us to do this today. Thank you.
Thank you. And Em and I have resources outside if you guys want to check out any of the stuff from P.h.D. They were here, so I'll go.
And recording.
She was dressed goth and